Welcome to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, respective radio stations island-wide, Tel TV Plus Channel 15, and online viewers. I'm Rolika Roach, and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, August 12, 2026. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment, and Infrastructure, Patrice Gums Jr., to address you. Minister Gums, you have the floor.
Good morning to my colleague ministers, especially warm welcome to Minister Claret Connor, members of the press, and to the viewing and listening public. I would like to begin by informing the general public that the solid waste and district cleaning tenders will be available for the interested bidders as of next week, Monday, August 17th. Interested persons are asked to pay attention to government's media outlets over the next 2 days as it relates to pricing of the tenders, dates, and related contact information. As it relates to hurricane preparation, during my last press briefing, I drew attention to the publication of waste collection schedules ahead of peak hurricane season by the haulers. These schedules outlined what can be dumped when and where and collection times. This week, government, through the Ministry of Romy, will begin aggressive removal of car wrecks. I wish to recall that the placement of car wrecks on public spaces is illegal. As it relates to abandoned cars, these too will be tagged for removal with the assistance of the Ministry of Justice. Once again, persons are also reminded that placing of abandoned cars on the roadside is illegal. The ministry will also begin its cleanup, inclusive of roads and greenery, as part of its wider hurricane preparations. Where possible, this will happen simultaneously to the removal of abandoned and wrecked vehicles. The public is asked to facilitate both ministries, enforcement personnel, and contractors over the course of the next few weeks. As a reminder, the public landfill remains free of charge. And if you have missed the designated time of your hauler, especially for bulky items including couches, fridges, stoves, please don't dispose of these on the roadside or at the side of the bin. Access to the landfill, as stated, remains free. Make the effort to bring it to the public landfill. Every effort made means less trash on the sides of the roads and a cleaner St. Martin. Remember, it takes all of us. Now, I'd like to turn to some more general updates. I'm reminding all interested parties that this coming Monday, August 17th, is also the closing date to submit your bids for the drainage study tender for Coal Bay. This is the ministry's efforts to address stormwater management in the Coal Bay area and will be carried out in 2 phases, the first being the study and the second phase the execution of the works. Regarding stormwater pumps, as stated, the first pump has been installed in Star Garden, and the second pump in the Romy yard is currently being installed. We are very much on schedule, and the pumps will be ready to manage stormwater-related incidences, which is critical as we enter into peak hurricane season. Next week, I'll provide further information and updates as to the beginning of the trials and tests. Finally, over the past 3 weeks, the Ministry of Romy has been carrying out house visits in the district of Dutch Quarter. This is in connection to the project, the 10th EDF, Household Connections, to connect households to the main sewage network along the main road towards connecting persons to sewage lines at the wastewater treatment plant on 8 Tailed Road. Persons are kindly asked to facilitate as the Ministry of Romy continues its last and final week, this coming weekend, Saturday 8 to 12, with household visits. Persons will be given a brief explanation of the project and be provided an agreement to which they have to sign once Romy returns at the start of the project within the course of the next coming months. With that, I come to the end of my opening remarks and look forward to the questions from the media. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Gums, for your opening remarks. I would now like to invite the Honorable Minister of Public Health, Social Development, and Labor, Claret Connor, to address you. Minister Connor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rolika. First of all, I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude for the opportunity to serve as your Minister of Public Health, Social Development, and Labor. I would like to make the use of this opportunity to once more share my sincere thoughts and prayers to those impacted by the unfortunate incident experienced in Colombia. As you are aware, St. Martin and Colombia have a collaborative relationship where our citizens are transferred for medical care. I am relieved that based on reports I've received thus far from SZV, our patients have been accounted for and are safe. I took the oath of office on Wednesday, August 5th, 2026, and immediately my team and I were already at work. Our priority is in this first week has been to bring ourselves fully up to date on the current state of affairs across the ministry. My cabinet has received a thorough transition document prepared by the ministry, which we are in the process of completing our review to ensure continuity, accountability, and effective governance across ongoing initiatives. While this review is still ongoing, several priority areas have already come into focus and warrant our attention. These are not the only matters before us, but are among the first we are moving on, such as GHI, the updated SZV ordinance, the preparation or the continuation of the preparation for the budget debate along with the VSA team, and updates on the hospital and mental health clinic projects. My apologies. I would like to make use of the opportunity to once more share my sincere thoughts and prayers to those impacted by the unfortunate incident in Colombia. Since this is my first engagement with the press as minister, I want to use it to make a simple commitment to you. The information shared from this podium will be accurate, timely, and carefully verified before it reaches you. Where we do not have complete answers, we will say so rather than speculate. This is a responsibility I take seriously, and I look forward to building a relationship with the press grounded in that trust. In closing, I want to thank the people of St. Martin for entrusting us with this responsibility. Public health, social development, and labor touches nearly every household here, and we do not take that lightly. As usual, my door and this podium will remain open. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Connor, for your opening remarks. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, Dr. Luke Marcelina, to address you. Prime Minister Marcelina, you have the floor.
Thank you for that. Good morning first to the members of the media and of course also the members of DCOM, the Department of Communication, the ministers here joining us, and of course the people of St. Martin. Good morning and thank you for joining us this morning. First of all, although it's by now known, I want to once more make use of this opportunity to welcome our new Minister of Public Health, Social Development and Labor. I wish to begin by publicly welcoming this new minister, Minister Connor, Claret Connor, as our new Minister of VSA. Minister Connor, congratulations on your appointment and on assuming this important responsibility. The Ministry of VSA, as you know, touches the daily lives of our people in a very direct way, from healthcare and labor to social protection and the well-being of our most vulnerable in our country. I wish you strength, wisdom, and every success possible as our new minister. And I look forward to working closely with you and supporting you as part of our Council of Ministers. Once more, Welcome, Minister Claret Connor. Secondly, of course, we have been being updated by the media already about the earthquake in Colombia. The Minister of VSA just touched base on it, and I think as Prime Minister of the country, I also wish to briefly address the devastating earthquake that struck Colombia on Monday, August the 10th, resulting in the loss of lives, injuries, and widespread destruction. On behalf of the government and the people of St. Martin, of course, I again extend our deepest sympathy to the families who have lost loved ones. We wish strength and a full recovery to those who were injured, and we stand in solidarity with the people of Colombia during this very difficult period. Colombia, of course, as the Minister of VSA said already, has a strong tie with St. Martin. Many members of our community have family and loved ones there, while several of our patients travel to Colombia for medical treatment. Understandably, the first question that came up here in St. Martin is the one of the families who were questioning the situation, the status of their loved ones. I'm, though, deeply relieved that based on the confirmation received through the Minister of VSA, that is again the one supervising SZV, we understood that our patients that we sent for medical treatment are safe. Of course, there can be some slight injury that took place while trying to escape the hazards, but of course also the mental impact, but in general, the patients are safe that are now in Colombia. I want to also make use of this opportunity to commend the Minister Connor once more that he just took office and he got himself confronted with this issue that falls under his responsibility, because we have patients from St. Martin there. And I think he did a great job to be updated immediately and see where his contribution could be to safeguard the patients coming from St. Martin. The government will continue to monitor this development and remain in contact with the relevant authorities. I would like to make use of this opportunity. If there are families in Colombia guiding the patients or the patients themselves, if there are any questions or lack of information or whatever assistance acute needed in Colombia, it is an option and a possibility to contact the Dutch embassy in Colombia, in this case, established in Bogota. So if we have urgent cases, as you know, we are one kingdom. We have an embassy in Bogota, Colombia. If there is any question or any information needed or any assistance, a option is also to contact the Dutch embassy in Bogota. I will make use of this opportunity to actually share the telephone number of the embassy in Bogota with all of you. Now it's +57 and then 163-84200. I will repeat, +57 and then 163-84200. That is concerning the earthquake of Colombia. Secondly, actually, thirdly, the developments concerning the criminality that is going on in St. Martin. There is a lot going on in St. Martin. Also, actually, we are confronted regularly through the press, social media, about incidents that happen in our community. And I understand the public's concern. When people hear about violent incidents or criminal activity, of course, it naturally creates fear, frustration, and uncertainty. And of course, no resident should feel that these concerns are being dismissed or minimized. It's not to justify it, absolutely not, but for us to stay in balance with the information that we get every day. It's important to know that a research was done with the incidents compared to last year, and there is no increase in the incidents as such. We see, though, a different accent in the type of crimes that we are encountering in our community, but it's the incidents as such are not more compared to 2025 until now. That does not mean that that loses attention of government and the Justice Department, absolutely not, but everything has to be put in the right proportion. And it's important to know, although the last days we have been confronted with quite violent incidents, the amount as such is not more than last year, but we see that there is a little more violence taking place compared to last year, and the type of crime is a little different compared to last year. But it has our attention, our focus, and as a government, we will continue to do what we have to do to keep this criminality under control. Another topic that I would like to share some words on is the litter and the cleanliness of our country. Dear lovers of St. Martin, dear people of St. Martin, it worries me when I drive around in the car and I see actually an increase in the littering and the cleanliness of St. Martin. And finally, St. Martin, you have to realize, is our home. The condition of our roadsides, our beaches, neighborhoods, and public spaces reflects the pride and care we have for our beloved country. And I see it every day. The littering is increasing. It's getting more and more in our country. I'm very glad that the Minister of Romy just took the opportunity to share the information that we will start a campaign to try controlling, for example, the abandoned cars and the wrecks. And I'm very happy that ultimately we are also doing our part. I want to share with you, though, that it's not only the responsibility of government, it is our responsibility as a citizen of this country also to adhere to decent rules of knowing what you have to do with litter and the garbage you produce. That is actually, until now, what I would like to share with you. And if there is anything else that you would like to question me about, feel free to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister Marcelino, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you're watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, August 12, 2026. Thank you for joining us. We now move over to the question and answer session. However, before we begin, I would like to inform that the Honorable Minister of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport, Melissa Gums, is present, however, will not be making any opening statements, but available for any questions the media may have. Emil Lee of Island 92 Radio, as you're the only media partner here, I will allow you to call on your First Minister. You have the floor.
Great, thank you, Erlika. I'm going to start with the Minister of Romy. Morning, Minister.
Morning.
So while I understand you cannot comment on individual and specific cases, I'll try and make this as general as possible. There is currently an incident going on in Indigo Bay where a developer is excavating and it appears that they have over-excavated and is causing damage to a number of other houses in the area. I managed to get a hold of the Civil Works permit, and the Civil Works permit gives permission to excavate between 1 to 4 meters, and it looks like indeed the survey shows that it's been over-excavated. So my question to you is, Romy has issued a Civil Works permit. Romy has a responsibility to inspect and ensure that the criteria of the permits are adhered to. But now you have citizens with houses that they've had to empty swimming pools, damage to foundations, walls, serious issues. But now they're left with the legal costs and the hassle of trying to restore their property to a safe condition. But what is Romy's responsibility in terms of making sure that civil works permits are adhered to, and what's Romy's responsibility when it's not adhered to? Will Romy take part in offering solutions or perhaps even legal consequences for what's happened?
Yep. Thank you very much for that question, Emil. And I think what's very important to recognize is this actually just boils down to an issue of enforcement. I'm not necessarily sure if this particular case has been reported to the ministry as yet, but we do, of course, as everyone knows, have an issue with capacity to enforce. So yes, the Ministry of Romy does carry out site inspection checks throughout the island, well, throughout the 16 square miles that we are responsible for. But of course, in some instances, we do miss certain sites. If this information hasn't come to the ministry, I'd like to ask the person who has sort of raised the alarm in it to contact the ministry about it so we can carry out a site inspection. What's important to recognize is that very often persons believe that getting a civil works permit means, okay, it's a rubber stamping and I can just go ahead and excavate. You really have to follow the elements of your permits. If it's 1 to 4 meters and it's gone beyond the 4 meters, then Romy will actually enforce and then make a recommendation. Will actually make a stop order for the work to stop if it hasn't already gone that far or been finalized, to actually continue to actually go ahead and repair and put back the earth that is been excessively removed. If, of course, persons, I want to make this statement, if persons, when receiving their permit, recognize or realize that the permit that they have needs an amendment, you have to actually come in and request that amendment before you actually go and, for example, excavate further or change something in your design of your construction. So I think oftentimes what we've seen is that persons receive permits for several things. In the process of construction, they realize that, hey, I may need to make a change. I have a permit, I'll just go ahead and make it. Very formally, that's not allowed. What is permitted is supposed to be executed, and anything additional in terms of changes has to be requested and approved by the ministry. So with that, if this hasn't been flagged, this particular case hasn't been flagged to the ministry yet, I invite the person to please contact the ministry if they haven't done so already and provide the information so we can carry out a site inspection.
Okay, I believe that actually the ministry's generated a report already, so I will verify.
Okay.
I believe it's also gone to court. But my question still stands in terms of, if the permit's been violated, will Romy assist in finding a solution, or are the homeowners on their own in terms of finding a solution?
Yeah, so again, it depends. If the work is currently ongoing, I mean, if it's gone as far as a court case, this means this is quite far. But usually what happens if the Romy is flagged of an incident that's occurring, we issue a stop order, and then the work has to be stopped until it's resolved. Now, of course, if it's already gone to the court, then that's a civil matter that then has to take place between the two persons, the person who has overly excavated, and of course their neighbors involved. Romy, of course, is willing to provide documentations via l'obverzoek if required, as well as statements regarding what was permitted and what is not permitted. But in terms of Romy's involvement in terms of solutions, we have, for example, the possibility of contracting third-party assessors who can assist us, actually, because not a lot of the expertise is in-house, on what a possible solution is, and we actually are currently doing that for several cases throughout the island. So that's something that's also an option, but of course it depends on the case itself. What may be an ideal situation is, Emil, if you allow me to actually get them acquainted with this file, I can then provide some information in terms of what we can do to support and where our limitations would be.
Thank you. I think I know the people with the issue would appreciate, because they're faced with all the lawyers' bills, the engineering bills, and this wasn't of their creation. My next question has to do with infrastructure, traffic. Hopefully this hurricane season will be light. It's supposed to be, although there's a couple storms pending. But we do know that the busy season's going to come, traffic is going to come. So what are Romy's plans to make sure that road repairs, maintenance, those types of things are done in the low season, and try and ensure that the high season, that the traffic is less
Flows.
Yes, is better than last year, yes.
Yeah, I think there's several things. I think what's important to recognize is there's a distinction between traffic, mobility, and infrastructure. And I think very often we kind of sort of use those things interchangeably. The Ministry of Romy is responsible, as you stated, for infrastructure. Over the past about a month ago, 2 months ago, we did urgent intervention repairs onto the roads. It did have it did help to sort of address the issue of traffic. But I think what's also important to recognize is that there is, of course, more that has to be done more structurally in terms of how you maintain and structure your roads. Beyond the issue of road quality, which, as stated, does have an impact on traffic, it's also a question of mobility. Mobility itself has to do a lot more with how persons use the roads and also the amount of vehicles you have on the roads. From the side of Romy, what we're doing is actually, and we spoke about this quite extensively over the last couple of months, is looking at how we can assist in how we use our roads more efficiently. So there's a discussion ongoing about the Ring Road, for example. There was an effort done towards seeing how we can clean up the road to have it accessible. That's actually been expanded now towards a discussion about the full realization of the Romy of the Ring Road. That's a more long-term discussion. Second to that, there was a proposal done within the Council of Ministers and then to the Kobe community regarding the potential realigning of the roads along the Kobe district to allow for better flow of traffic. There were a lot of critical responses to that from the Kobe community, and of course we're taking those into discussion because the proposal was to aid with the sort of the Kobe, Simpson Bay traffic that occurs throughout the day, almost every day. And then finally, of course, we had the discussion about efficient use of the roads when it comes to the area of Clem-La-Bega Square. There's quite a bottlenecking that happens there. The idea, of course, is to make that into a roundabout that allows traffic to continuously flow and not bottleneck in the different areas, in particular in front of Islands Bank and the former KFC. More structurally, I think those are the sort of the short things that we're trying to do, short-term things we're trying to do in terms of fixing the roads and also mobility movement. But I think more long-term, what's important to recognize is that the Ministry of TEAT is actually the one who is responsible for a lot of these different initiatives when it comes to mobility. Last year, actually, I announced that the ministry had signed an agreement with UNOPS to develop a traffic mobility study. We signed that MOU, letter of intent, actually this year. And then in discussions with UNOPS, we've actually then, you would have recalled that the Minister of TEAT about 2 weeks ago announced as well that she was actually doing a traffic study as well. This isn't necessarily sort of two different cases, they're actually complementary. The Ministry of TEAT is carrying out a holistic carrying capacity study that's actually going to identify how much more we can do. UNOPS's role comes in after that study is completed in terms of the interventions that can be done. We have made that decision because UNOPS identified already that the work being done by the Ministry of TEAT was far broader than what their scope was going to be. So the idea is that mobility study has to be completed first from the Ministry of TEAT. Once that's completed, then UNOPS comes in with recommendations in terms of the more hard infrastructural investments. But I think what's also important to discuss, and I think it's really the elephant in the room that I've spoken about several times, we really have to address the amount of vehicles, but before you can address that, and I think the Minister of TEAT is working very diligently on that, is to address public transportation. One, a proper system, and two, reflecting on the number of licenses for buses and taxis that have been issued, because the reality is the lack of public transportation system that's reliable forces us all to have additional cars, and of course, the number of buses that are regulated is also to protect the market, but also to allow the taxi drivers already in the market to actually have time for guests and actually have enough guests. If you flood the market, then you actually damage the market. So those are the big things that the government are actually working towards addressing within the bigger discussion of traffic mobility. But I think it's important to recognize that from the side of the Ministry of Environment, which is more infrastructure execution side, we have been doing a lot of the road repairs. They were on pause, of course, because on a small island you have limited asphalt supply. There is a shipment of asphalt coming in shortly, and we can, of course, then begin again with minor repairs. From a more long-term perspective of infrastructure, we are looking, of course, at the use of the road fund to adequately manage maintenance more structurally, but of course to looking at something that we discussed with Minister Herde during my visit in Aruba. How do you actually manage and grade your roads? So you look at, for example, pavement condition indexes, PCIs, that actually tells you how you're supposed to intervene on a road, when and how, but then you're actually doing the right interventions per your budget and cost allocations. So quite a mouthful, but I think it's very important to recognize that a lot is being done. But the small intervention that we constantly do aren't enough anymore. You really have to structure and restructure the system that we work in as it relates to buses, transportation, and vehicles as well.
So my last question then for you, I believe you have funds in your capital improvement funds. Why not look at the expansion of the road network? I mean, there's been discussions of trying to connect the Cole Bay side of the Causeway Bridge over the hill to whatever, Dutch Quarter, French Quarter. That would do a lot in terms of relieving the need to pass through a long series of roads. Would help to alleviate traffic a lot. Are you looking at those types of long-term projects as well?
We are, but I think what's also important, because in the discussion with the experts of UNOPS, and why UNOPS was originally brought in by my ministry, was actually to do those exact same things, see how we can have infrastructure interventions. The recommendations were actually, you need to actually efficiently use what you have first, because if we recall, when the causeway was built, the causeway's intention was to actually alleviate traffic. But if you don't shift your policies into where it's supposed to be, a couple of years later, we're already seeing the challenges with the causeway itself, because we haven't actually changed behavior. We've just bandaged it with a new road. But if you copy-paste the same transportation policies, the same traffic use policies, the same vehicle import policies, at some point, you're going to have the same exact problem. So the message from the experts has been, before you make new infrastructure, while very much important and valid for long term, try to maximize what you actually have in your current infrastructure. So this is where the mobility and capacity studies come in. The low-hanging fruit about, for example, using your roads more efficiently comes in. And then the second phase is, of course, infrastructure investments in terms of new roads. I want to also point out that we do have CapEx from the Dutch government, of course. That CapEx came in 2023, December. Of course, if it comes in December, it's rolled over until 2024. That CapEx itself is actually now been spent. With the budget 2026, which is scheduled to be handled in Parliament very shortly, once that budget is approved, then we can make a new request for CapEx. Because I think it's very important to recognize that we don't have CapEx until we have an approved budget linked to a CapEx. So you finish off your CapEx for 2023, which we have now finished off, and then, of course, then you make a new request. Important to realize is that the CapEx requested was earmarked for a certain amount of interventions in the road, and of course, if you have to make that request for new CapEx, we can. And but I think what's very important is to see this within the bigger picture of fixing and using efficiently what we currently have before you make new interventions. We are, of course, having discussions on several different things, including that link potential from Causeway Bridge into Dutch cul-de-sac area, as well as a discussion that's been long going on between the connection of South Reward with French Quarter with the landowners as well. These are very highly intense capex projects. They were, and of course, they will take time planning and, of course, as you indicated, financing. But for us, the most important thing right now is to actually make efficient what you have, because that's the easy, low-hanging fruit, and then you make the interventions in infrastructure going forward.
So just for clarity, you refer to the need to change behavior, but you also refer to, even as we were discussing to begin with, the challenges that government has with enforcement. The Prime Minister talked about littering. There's legislation regarding fines for littering, but yet it's never enforced. So somehow you need to get the enforcement. Don't you need to get the enforcement in line if you want that change of behavior?
Indeed, and this is why a couple of months ago, if you recall, Emile, the ministry actually finally, for the first time, reinstated BAF pull offices within the inspection department. That's critical because before this, what it meant was the persons within the inspection department were only able to issue stop orders. Now they're actually able to produce documentation that can be used and sent to court. And then finally, they're doing additional training end of this year, and we're of course finalizing administrative enforcement, because all these different things, while they exist within government on paper, they actually don't have the operationalization possibility to actually implement and enforce how we're supposed to enforce properly.
Great, thank you.
I just have one comment that I forgot to mention in my opening remarks. Thanks for the quick 1 minute. We are, of course, the Ministry of Romy, beginning yesterday with the cleanup of the K-Bay Cemetery. All persons are reminded this is the final chance to please come out, identify your loved ones. This is in connection, of course, to the cleanup that's happening. We're currently in 3 phases with sifting of the large pile that's been there for 13 years. It's finally happening, so thank you to the K-Bay community as well in Seoul for their intervention. But please contact the K-Bay community, President Sharon Kanagiter, with regards to your family and loved ones, because when the work starts, we unfortunately have to get this going, and we will be very hard-pressed to stop. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Gums. Before we continue, Emil, I would like to inform that Minister Gums' Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport has to leave soon. So if you have any questions, can you kindly pose those to her now, please?
Sure. Let me readjust. So for Minister of Education, it's nice to see you. It's been a while.
Good morning.
So I'm going to go back. I think we're going back all the way towards the end of last year, beginning of this year. In terms of the FBE exams and the evaluation of the results from those exams, as well as from the early grade reading assessment and early grade math assessment. At the time, you had referred to those results as very worrisome. You also referred to your personal experience, I think when you were at UTS, that people would apply for jobs and have difficulty even writing a proper application, email. Schools getting ready to restart. So what changes have you put in place for the upcoming school year to tackle the results of what you saw from the exams last year?
Thank you for the question, and good morning to everyone and my colleagues. I want to take a brief moment to welcome my new colleague, Minister Connor, for VSA. I haven't had a chance to do that as yet. Looking forward to working with you in this new capacity. With regards to FBE and the EGRA-EGMA, what the ministry has been working on are more long-term solutions. I think, as I've said several times in the public and in Parliament, the FBE review recommendations didn't call for immediate changes to the system. In fact, what we've seen is that 22 years ago, FBE was rolled out, not in its full form. There were supposed to be 3 cycles, now there are only 2. And I think that is an unfortunate challenge that we have on St. Martin, where we take a system, I think my cabinet likes to use the analogy of we buy a Ferrari and then we take the engine out because it's too expensive to run the engine. But then you only have a Ferrari with a hood ornament and not an actual Ferrari. So I think That's been sort of what we have seen between the EGMA results and the FBE results of that review. There has to be a comprehensive approach. What we have been facing are challenges with funding, because what it really calls for is continuous, sustained teacher retraining. We have an unfortunate scenario where many teachers have not been trained in the FBE curriculum. Some have even reported that the first time they see it, they've already been on the job for 3 months. This is a problem in both public and subsidized education, just to make that clear. Of course, the private schools are not included in that. So now you have to undergo comprehensive retraining of many teachers across 2 different school systems, one of which the ministry has full authority over. So the focus has been, of course, on how we can blend all teachers together in this targeted retraining. Once, of course, funding is identified, we're awaiting the handling, public handling of Budget 2026, and then hopefully thereafter the public handling of Budget 2027, to be able to move forward with certain amendments that have to be put in with regards to ensuring that these retrainings can happen. The last 2 days, there have also been some workshops with the public school teachers to identify some additional challenges that they foresee. I'm very happy that teachers have been very communicative in this process, have shared their experience with the FBE system and curriculum. But ultimately, that is really where the changes have to be made. Between the review that was provided to us by the Climb Foundation, it really starts at the root, and further to that, the actual root is also the willingness of parents to make the investment in the different resources that are needed for review, constant teaching of their students in FBE. I had an interesting conversation with Dr. Pierre, who described it as a marathon and not a sprint. What we are seeing is that when it comes to the final group in primary school, there's a panic to catch them up on things that they have not been grasping since their early stages. So I think that's also part of the retraining that has to be done across the board, from educators to also informing parents on what type of review process they should implement for their kid from a remedial perspective.
So indeed, it's interesting you touched on, if I recall, the public schools. Indeed, the ministry has full oversight and authority. But on the subsidized, if I remember from our previous conversations, you said basically you get a budget that you approve and you have very few resources or insights or even leverage, let's say, over those schools in terms of how they're executing. And then the private schools, even the teachers aren't even required to be licensed teachers. So you're managing the education output for St. Martin, yet as a ministry you have very limited tools.
Yes.
Have you addressed any of that?
So that's addressing 5 decades worth of habit and cultural norms. I've shared my views on how we've structured our education system in St. Martin. It's not something that can be fixed in 4 years. To be honest, it's pretty much, we're looking at a generational transition to actually regulate a lot of what has been decided in the past and become regular practice in education. So I think what I can say is that the subsidized school boards from a primary level have been willing to look at the FBE review. They've all received the report. And then as we move forward with teacher retraining and seeing what adjustments need to be made, I think they'll be cooperative with that, because ultimately as well with the supervision of education law, which should be in its final stages of review to be able to go to Parliament, their funding is going to also be tied to academic outcomes. And I think that is what has been lacking. Of course, subsidy is based on student count, and I think that has been the focus. However, if we look around, even at the EGMA results, there are instances where public school outperformed subsidized education. So that's also something that needs to be taken into consideration. I think the perception is that, public education is on the lesser end, but ultimately you're seeing that funding everywhere is not leading to the outcomes that we want to see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Gums. I would like to bid you a pleasant day further. Emil, your next minister.
My next question is for the Minister of VSR. So, Minister, first of all, welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's good that you have a full team again, a full complement. I realize that you're just in office. I assume that while you've been going through the screening process that you've been doing some of your homework. So I'm going to ask, have you had an opportunity to read the general health insurance legislation?
First of all, Emily, to address your statement in terms of the screening process, when the screening process was ongoing, I was still the director of the NRPB, so I had absolutely no time to focus on the office until actually moving into the office. But with regard to the GHI, I can say that the process is somewhat advanced, and we also have the updates that we have been discussing as the priority areas that I'm dealing with, for this week, and specific information on that can be shared when I do have that information. So I really can't get into details, but just generalities.
So I'm going to, I guess it's sort of a comment/question.
Sure.
One of the things that on our radio show we talk about a lot is that St. Martin does have an advantage in that very often when we're late implementing things, we have the benefit of being able to look to others to see what they've done well or not well and copy. We don't need to be as innovative as if we were the leaders. So my question is if you're willing to perhaps be open-minded in your approach to whether the general health insurance draft legislation is the right thing for St. Martin. And more specifically, I've looked at, and you can look these up, the CFT, I believe the CFT for Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin, they're different boards, different bodies, I think. But in any case, the CFT has issued a report saying Curacao has the highest healthcare expenditure in the region, and they've also made commentary on Aruba's need for reform in their healthcare legislation. And sadly, what I find the CFT for St. Martin, what they say is, you need to put a general health insurance legislation in place. And they don't offer any further commentary. I don't believe they've even looked at the general health insurance. I'm not sure, but that's perhaps a task if you're willing to do as a minister. But why not? Would you be willing to examine the general health insurance for Aruba and Curacao, see what's currently wrong with their legislation, and take those lessons and incorporate them one time in St. Martin, rather than implementing something that may not work? Why not learn from what the other Caribbean Dutch islands have already found out?
Yeah, indeed. I think based on the information that I have with regard to where the process is, the trajectory of GHI is in the legislative process as we are now, right? So the legislative process is one where a draft ordinance is being prepared, and that draft ordinance then will have to proceed to Parliament. And I believe that if within Parliament, with the debates that the members of Parliament and the community at large will be able to gain information on what is being presented with regard to the legislation, what you are actually suggesting, that would be the opportunity to improve on what is there in addressing some of the concerns that you just made with regard to the cost of health care, et cetera. So I think we are still at the stage where that can be considered. As you know, after the legislation reaches Parliament and is approved, then you go into the next phase of implementation. So I think we're still in that process of being able to upgrade what has been drafted, because there's a draft for a reason, right?
So I guess my more specific question then is, as you come into the ministry and you're going through your orientation, the ministry, the civil servants are going to push forth what's already in place.
Indeed.
My question then is, are you willing to challenge it and put your own stamp to it, to customize it to what best fits St. Martin, even if it goes against that trajectory? Because I believe, isn't it better that it's done correctly rather than just passing something and then having to revise it later? Are you willing to take that
I do
stance?
agree. I mean, I think when you look at anything that is being drafted or anything that is being drafted to be further reviewed, it is about the opinions of the individuals who are drafting. So again, you know, what you said about improving, if you do it right the first time, then you only have to do it once. So I would definitely consider all of the possible upgrades, all of the possible improvements, but at the end of the day, it should be something that serves St. Martin. It should have a St. Martin stamp on it, and that comes from thoroughly reviewing what has been presented thus far.
Thank you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
My last question for the Prime Minister.
Before I
sorry.
leave, I didn't mention it before, but I want to also thank my colleagues. Of course, you know, being at NRPB for the last 7.5 years, I've worked very closely with government, but now sitting on the other side of the fence, you know, this is an opportunity that I think is one that is humbling, and I you know, want to thank my colleagues for the warm welcome, and I look forward to working diligently with them as we improve this country that we all love. Thank you.
Good morning, Prime Minister. I've asked a couple of the other ministers in the past, but I believe this falls more directly under your ministry. Can you update us on the purchase of the new generators for GB?
Yep.
I mentioned to the Minister of TIOT, they're doing the study with BTP in terms of the operating costs of GB. But the generators that are currently operating are beyond their lifespan, I don't know, 20 years old. And I believe that the fuel efficiency, the effectiveness of their operation of a new generator versus the old generators should be different, should be dramatically more efficient. So we're doing this study on base rates and on the fuel clause, but we're doing it with, you know, outdated machinery, and that's going to change once you bring in the new generators. So can you comment on the status of the new generators?
Yes.
And also about the efficiency of the engine?
Yes. First of all, we have to realize that we have neglected in the past the evolution and support to the development of alternative green energy to start with. That development will for sure make a difference in the tariffs that will be paid ultimately by the consumers. We did not do that. And on the other side, as you said, we neglected even the fossil fuel operation of our standard generators. So we have two challenges. The first one is we have to guarantee a base sustainability of energy supply to the community. For that is the reason for only that guarantee we had no other choice than to see how we can replace those old generators that are between 25 to 30 years, by the way, before we can talk about sustainability on the long term with alternative green energy. We do not have the alternative green energy yet, and we have no stability of the grid with the old generators, but we have to first work on sustainability of the grid. And the moment we have sustainability of the grid with the new generators, we can then have the courage to start with the alternative green energy. We are far enough in the negotiations with the preferred supplier that we chose for, and we are now in the phase that the preferred supplier is only demanding a bank comfort letter from government and from GEBE. As you know, I have safeguarded 42 million in cooperation with the assistance of my Council of Ministers and, of course, negotiations with the Netherlands for an amount of 42 million US dollars. That's the first part. But in the time, the prices went up with the war that came, the Ukraine war we had first, but then now we have the war in the Middle East. All that of course, contributed to an increase in the price, so that 42 million will not be enough to purchase 3 generators. So the GB now is in the phase of negotiating with a consortium, being banks, to see if they can get the additional loan, and in this case, it's about 28 million additional to actually make sure that we have the amount necessary for the purchase of the generators. From the side of the bank, we have already our comfort letter ready. We proposed that to the preferred supplier. Their reaction was, please wait with handing over this comfort letter until you have the one of GB2, and then we're going to fuse them together to present them to the preferred supplier. We are just waiting now on the comfort letter of GB, and once we have this comfort letter, the next step is just some details to make sure that we can press the button for the ultimate deal to purchase the generators. So actually, we are very, very ready. We are now in the phase of comfort letters to the preferred supplier to purchase the generators. The amount of money that GEBE is negotiating for the additional 28 millions is, of course, a portion of that is to add to the 42 million to purchase the 3 generators, as we decided we would do in the beginning. Secondly, that amount is also for us to start working on a own national fuel farm for St. Martin. That is also going to contribute to the expenses by the production of energy for the country if our GEBE could have its own fuel farm with their own tanks. And thirdly, a share of that 28 million is also going to be used for the further development of alternative green energy. And next to that, a small portion is also going to be used to start preparing the plant for once the generators arrive. Actually, the base infrastructure is there to install the 3 generators. So it's about the fuel farm, it's about the preparations for the ordered generators, and it's also about actually starting with alternative green energy, and in this case, the solar panel project that we have. That is the update that I have for you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Just for clarity, the 28 million is dollars or
$28 million.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Emil. This does bring us to the end of the question and answer session. Any further questions can be sent to the Minister's Cabinet in writing. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, August 12, 2026. For rebroadcast, tune into stmartingov.org, St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, Tel TV Plus Channel 15, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, and YouTube channel Government of St. Martin. For video on demand, log on to the Government of St. Martin's YouTube channel. On behalf of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Rolika Roach and wishing you a pleasant day further.